The hall of celestial accord thrummed with the gravity of impending catastrophe. The delegations of the Rellian Star Compact and the K'thar Hive Imperium stood opposite each other on the vast, floating platforms, their respective star maps pulsing with aggressive crimson over the disputed Wajidjalo system. The air crackled with bioelectric hostility and the low hum of active personal shields. The system wasn't just resource-rich. It contained a unique stellar anomaly that both empires believed was key to perfecting their respective drives for faster-than-light ascension. Billions lived on colony worlds caught in the crossfire. The Universal Arbiter, a being of crystalline logic, began the proceedings. The calculus is clear. Projected casualties: 4.2 billion sentient lives across 3 worlds. Infrastructure loss: 98%. Cultural eradication: total for 5 minor species. We are here to establish rules of engagement and acceptable collateral damage. The war will proceed, but we shall civilize it. Speeches were made. Territorial lines were redrawn on holograms. Acceptable losses were negotiated upward and downward like commodities. Each side postured, threatening escalation if their new borders weren't met. The air was thick with the grim pragmatism of cosmic realpolitik. Only one delegate's platform remained conspicuously dark and empty throughout the proceedings. The placard, written in the universal glyph script, glowed with untranslated Terran lettering. United States of America. A junior clerk had checked the records. They had received the invitation, sent via quantum burst 5 cycles prior. They had simply not responded. The council dismissed it. Humans were newcomers, fractured, their political bodies prone to internal squabbling. Their absence was noted as a sign of irrelevance, not strategy. While giants debated how to sanitize a genocide, the child in the room had quietly left, and no one had noticed what it carried out with it. The summit ended with a tense, broiling accord. Rules were set. The war would begin in 6 standard cycles. As the delegations returned to their flagships, the war machines of 2 empires roared to life. Armadas of jagged Rellian destroyers and organic K'thar hive ships began their final maneuvers, converging on the Wajidjalo system like wolves to a slaughter. Then, at the moment the first forward scouts were to cross the nominal border, space itself seemed to reject them. The primary hyperlane, a stabilized corridor of subspace that had existed for millennia, didn't collapse with violence. It simply unraveled. Its navigational beacons, ancient and reliable, winked out not with explosions, but as if someone had flipped a switch. Secondary routes experienced gravitational shearing, so precise it sheared the warp fields from ships without damaging their hulls, leaving them drifting in normal space. Communication across the battlefront didn't jam. It was met with perfect, echoing silence, as if the very concept of a transmission had been deleted from that volume of space. Weapons were the most chilling. Targeting systems acquired locks, then immediately lost them, displaying error glyphs for target does not exist. Energy capacitors charged, then bled off power harmlessly into cooling vents. Missile launch sequences reached their final countdown and then reset to 0. It wasn't a defense system. It was a systemic negation of the function of war. The 2 vast fleets, moments from unleashing hell, found themselves floating impotently, unable to communicate, unable to navigate, unable to fight. The war didn't just stall. It was rendered technologically and physically impossible. Panic, profound and existential, replaced military fervor. This was not the work of either empire. It was something outside their understanding. Scouts were sent to investigate the edges of the effect. They found nothing. No news stations, no minefields, no enemy ships. Just space that refused to obey the rules of war. Then, from the heart of the contested system, a signal bloomed. It wasn't on modern frequencies. It was an archaic modulation, a carrier wave that predated the Rellian Empire's first starflight. It broadcast on a band used for deep space telemetry and stellar cartography, a band only the oldest automated beacons and lost probes still used. The voice that followed was synthetic, calm, and utterly devoid of emotion. It spoke in perfect, unaccented galactic common. Attention! YG stellar cluster and associated spatial volume zeta 7 through theta 12 is designated a Tier 1 cultural and ecological preservation zone. Active conflict protocols detected. Pursuant to Sol Accord, Article 7, all unauthorized aggressive actions are suspended. Hyperlane access revoked. Weapons lock disabled. Communications quarantine active. There was a pause that stretched across light minutes. Then, as an afterthought, the signal added, "Note: unauthorized conflict void system access permits. Please recalibrate." The message began to repeat, a ghostly loop echoing through the paralyzed fleets. The Celestial Accord reconvened in emergency session, this time in a state of bewildered terror. Their analysts scoured the data. The signal's origin was traced not to a ship, but to a network of inert-looking orbital bodies they had cataloged as natural asteroids or ancient, derelict comets. Scans now revealed them to be anything but. Under layers of cosmic dust and micrometeorite pitting were hull alloys and power signatures of human origin, dating back over 3 centuries. They weren't weapons. They were regulators. Invisible gates that could manipulate local subspace fields. Autonomous systems woven into the fabric of the system's magnetic fields and solar radiation. Energy locks tied to the fundamental vibrations of the system's pulsar, creating a harmonic key that, when disrupted by weapons fire or warp signatures, triggered a systemic shutdown. America, in its early, expansive exploration, hadn't just mapped these systems. It had quietly, patiently, hardwired them with a constitution. A set of physical laws layered atop natural law that said, simply, "Thou shalt not make war here." The war wasn't stopped by a superior army. It was stopped because the battlefield had been designed, long ago, to reject violence. The two empires weren't fighting each other. They were trying to fight in a room where the very concept of fighting had been architecturally removed. A direct, frantic query was sent to Earth's governing bodies. After days of silence, a response came, not from a president or general, but from the Office of Deep Space Infrastructure and Long-Term Stewardship. It was a simple text communique. Regarding your inquiry on YG Jidaloth, local designation, System PSR B1620-26. Human exploratory and science vessels first mapped that system 284 standard years ago. Recognizing its unique stellar nursery and the presence of pre-sentient crystalline life forms in its nebulae, it was placed under protective status via the Sol Accord, a foundational terrestrial environmental treaty. The autonomous preservation systems you encountered are standard caretaker platforms, installed to maintain ecological balance and prevent destructive exploitation. Their conflict resolution protocols are a passive feature, triggered by specific energy signatures consistent with mass casualty warfare. The summit to decide the fate of the system was indeed noted. Our presence was not required, as the system's status was already adjudicated and enforced under our existing stewardship framework. We were not invited to your council, but we have been maintaining that garden since before your empires learned to split the atom. The final line was a hyperlink to a public archive. It contained schematics, environmental surveys, and logs, all dated centuries before the Rellians or the K'thar had achieved spaceflight. The timestamp was incontrovertible. The galaxy learned a new, terrifying form of power that day. It wasn't the power to destroy your enemies. It was the power to have already decided, generations ago, how a piece of the universe should function, and to have built that decision so deeply into its infrastructure that later civilizations simply stumbled into it as an unchangeable law of nature. Humanity didn't win wars. It made wars into engineering errors. The ultimate power was not to rule the stars, but to have been their quiet, unnoticed groundskeeper, holding the keys to reality itself.